Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is time for a WebBot report. This is not a IDR report or immediacy data report. This is a ALTA report. So this expands out a number of years from right now and includes right now. Um, as usual, my little pre-speech. I'm following the WebBot for a long time, many, many, many years. I've seen some spectacular hits from this thing in advance. Could never have known this, normally speaking. There's been times where it just did not get it. Other times where it got it spectacular, just a year or two later when it should have happened. Um, Nonetheless spectacular. Um, I can't read you the whole thing. It's copyrighted material, so I do my own little summary, and I just go paragraph to paragraph. I may skip pages and include the next paragraph after that. You may not know that just because I'm reading one after the other, but nonetheless, that's how I do it. So here we go. We're going to start with the Terra or Earth-based entity data set. The data sets clearly are showing that we, planet Earth riders, are going to be riding shocks and waves. The data has grown from the Terra entity, the fastest and largest growing entity, at rates not seen before for this entity. Usually it's more slowly changing than other entities. Not this time. New growth in expansion of planet datasets as well as the resulting wacky weather subset for that growth. We are seeing new areas for wild winds, including some sets indicating that skyscraper buildings will be severely damaged by winds that will be described as freakish, only to reappear the next few days in the region, damaging more tall buildings. In some instances, residents will have to be evacuated due to loss of windows, therefore, heat and shelter from the storm aren't going to happen because you're going to be exposed. These data sets are also indicating that power loss will further hamper the tall rescue efforts. We have data sets that describe new channels or canals being gouged and cut from both rural land but also urban environments. This last includes language about impacts of 4 years of rain in 23 hours that will roar down narrow/restricted streets lined with 3 and 4 story buildings with such force. Hang on 1 second. All right. Heard a weird noise in my speakers and mic. I didn't know if my thing stopped recording or something. So 23 hours, we're going to have 4 years worth of rain that will roar down narrow/restricted streets lined with 3 and 4 story buildings with such force that the buildings will be groaning against the back roar of the water. These sets have very high visibility and will show up online as videos are taken by survivors. Oh, anyway. I thought I hit the mute. I must have missed it. Better late than never. Okay. In some cases, cars and buses will be piled up into street dams that will so block the water flow as to create in city town or in city lakes or in town lakes, if you will, that will subsume whole apartment buildings. These instances are being described as common enough to have many different locations of similar scenes around the planet. Further, in several areas, the rains created dams will have to have military attacks to remove them after the rains pass. The datasets are describing one of the first of these inner-city dam removals as going badly when the cars/debris is pulled loose by a tank/crane from the bottom. Residual water, at least 40 feet high, rushes out and pushes all the offending equipment into an even bigger dam several blocks further downhill. As this dam removal experience has high visibility, it will be apparently a hit online as a video and many and other military efforts do not involve this approach. In at least one instance, a major underground facility for telecoms will be washed away or filled with mud to the point that it will need to be relocated or slash rebuilt. Got a yawn again, man. I'm not, I'm not even tired. Global pop data set or entity. Crises at so many different levels. In the data sets holding model space representation of the ongoing monetary slash currency crisis or crises, the newly acquired supporting sets include language going to the idea of marches and demonstrations in many capitals and large cities that will feature death to the bankers language with specific references to Jewish and Rothschild. This is indicated to be a temporal marker for a number of major social shifts to shake the global population through 2016 and 2017. And for those of you that don't know exactly what a temporal marker is, it just means that these are, or this, whatever it's talking about happening, when you see that happen, then you know a number of other things are, talked about in the report are getting ready to happen. Things like that's what it means. So it's kind of like, here's your warning call. This happened, so that means this, this, and this are about to happen. In general, it is far to say that at, that all our sets or data sets for government, no matter where the geographic references are pointing, are all carrying primary support in some form of language going to power crisis. There are various differing forms of power crisis appearing in various different sets, and we have some where the language is showing that the problem that government is going to face most is actually a crisis over or about electrical power, not political power. These sets are very dominant within the subgroups for both islands and island states, regional self-determining determination zones, he says. All of these are shown as experiencing an array of problems with keeping the lights on and the local air conditioning humming. But in the end, all of these proximate cause language carries back over to credit freeze or one of its many differing labels globally. In some sets, the power crisis is more a political social problem that may have elements of been here before, but in this new world, again, the underlying or causal trigger for why the crisis here and now will revert back to credit freeze. It must be noted that in many countries, the credit freeze language will be accompanied by linguistics going to evil XXX is the cause of this dastardly credit freeze intended to make paupers of our beloved ZZZ country, and other words to blame the whole financial condition on a conspiracy to bankrupt and take over. These sets include language about China as the cause for the credit freeze from many American and other Western big mouths. One of the most species altering social shifts is to be the failure of confidence that will first hit the emotional ties to paper currency, and then the data shows that it escalates up to failure of confidence in central banks, which then goes further to the failure of confidence in any banks. Note that the failure of banks themselves contributes to this emotional trend, and then quickly to failure of confidence in politicians and government. Not a good situation for government. It seems the powers that be have no mechanism nor plan for coping with the failure of confidence in their systems. This situation is described as playing out over the next 5 years in what had been the Western empire of the dollar. There are specific sets within the detail layers for crowds slash mobs taking over cell towers slash installations as warm spots for the night and causing widespread disruption of service. There are sets for instances of mass car theft in which whole dealerships are looted, with the vehicles being driven as far as they will go on whatever gas is in them at the time of the theft, and thereafter abandoned when the tank was empty. There are specific detail sets for small subdivisions and retail centers becoming both battlegrounds as well as temporary new villages as the refugees are herded by terrain and circumstances into fortuitous places. Many, and again, this isn't America only. This is like global, right? We're on the global pop data set here. Many sets show breakdowns in government through internal fighting, as there is no consensus nor even dominant approach. So power vacuums develop that propel the political system across Europe into breakdown, disarray, and dysfunction. The longer-term sets have new growth patterns for military involvement by 2016. Many new sets are also indicating that the military itself is engaged as a part of the refugee story in Europe by 2019, as governments have failed, currencies are either gone or very weak, as global hyperinflation has set in, such that payment in currencies is meaningless in many cases. This produces a situation of the unpaid former military forces who are described as participating in the diaspora at several levels, different levels that will include marching for money as social systems crumble and food availability is unstable. The data sets are showing that turf wars begin all over the planet at levels that the power that be, or officialdom, had not actually anticipated. While they thought certain populations may be reactive to promoted immigration, the data is suggesting that the powers that be will react badly when surprised by public demonstrations against immigration. The datasets are forecasting that officialdom did not anticipate that their social engineering would lift the populace into a point where it could view itself. In other words, the actions of the powers that be will bring out protests that will not succeed in altering the powers that be or officialdom, but will succeed hugely at bringing together the majority of peoples in their understanding of their own political power by way of sheer numbers. These data sets are suggesting that political protests, or social drama, at scales not seen before will cripple the agenda of the governments across much of the Western world. New data sets for the Mid East include further sets about the strategic blunder made by the House of Saud, or Saudi Arabia, when it invades or has invaded Yemen. These sets continue to accrue new values for the revenge of the people rising up in both Yemen and Arabia, formerly Saudi's Arabia. In these sets, the blowback from the invasion brings the battles back to the Saudis. These sets also include several sets for royals' assassinations being public video recorded, as well as one spectacular instance when fleeing royals are set upon by mobs while in their airplane attempting to flee. These sets also include data for major destruction of infrastructure during the fighting that may include oil terminals, but certainly does include major shopping ports. The idea here is that several ships will be deliberately sunk as part of the response to the invasion of Yemen. These ships are sunk to create a bottleneck and to cause a trap to be formed for Saud military forces. Lots of data sets for captured royals and beheadings and torture. In these cases, both are described as being public. Further sets go to the idea that British royals will become involved. The datasets would seem to be indicating that the British royals will expend some serious effort to try to negotiate the release of at least one group of captured Saudi royals. The datasets are filling up supporting sets for something of a global phenomenon to emerge over winter 2015-2016 and continue through 2016. This new meme is going to the idea of personal revenge against banksters. At its core, the datasets are discussing either individual murders of banksters in revenge for personal problems caused by them, or the many instances of mob violence against banksters. In some of these sets, there are also detail sets going to the idea that at least one royal will be caught within the bankster's vehicle, and he says airplane question mark, as it is mobbed and destroyed. The datasets are indicating that at a press conference about the event, the Royals spokesperson will be heard, probably a live mic issue maybe, to say that who cares about some scum banker? A Royal was involved. This does not set well within the banking community, and therefore it appears as though the Royals of the planet are also being targeted, not necessarily by the locals anymore. So now we're going to go into the USA pop entity. Most concerning to us, probably most people watching this video, because you're more than likely an American, 90-something% of you easily. There is considerable growth in many of the data sets within the USA POP for severe impacts from the now having begun credit freeze language. These sets are forecasting continuing outages for electronic payments systems. No mention of Bitcoin or blockchain, though, that will be affecting very large segments of either the population or the business ecosphere. These sets are forecasting EBT outages to continue to rise exponentially as the many attempts to fix the system result in the kludge from hell. Other sets are suggesting similar situations for the SWIFT international payment system and for the postal system, although it appears that the deliveries failures will not be visible until nearly the end of November 2015. As the various parts of the credit system begin to freeze over, as the data would have it, the underlying support that credit provided to various real-world systems in everyone's life becomes visible very suddenly and usually very shockingly. In the new accretion patterns, the data is spreading over a wide number of sets and is also going deep into supporting positions in a majority of the terminating sets. These data elements include forecasts of no gasoline in large regions, no electricity, no water, no store deliveries, or if electricity store replete, they will not be able to sell due to computer outages at some central server that just went down due to its region losing power and no diesel for backups for like their generators. The longer term data sets within the USA POP are forecasting that the political season, late 2015 or 16, has just morphed into the 10th level of hell for professional politicians here in the USA. These new sets have rising sets within the supporting groups for mass or populace and the reaction to rise of gold relative to the dollar. In these sets, we find many references to sets such as blinded by greed and captivated by gold fever, and others that are at the core of a new group of sets describing via the longer term data an American point of view in transition. This new point of view includes language that suggests that the USA POP moves its understanding to gold/silver as being endless flow of wealth. This language has appeared for the first time within this major subset and former entity. Further, these sets have extensive crosslinks over to the markets entity, and a majority either touch upon or terminate at the US dollar subset. The data sets show that the USA POP will also, concurrent with the breakdowns in the VA system or Veterans Affairs system, also be experiencing severe housing crises in several states and regions. These housing crises will include infrastructure failure, water, electricity, transportation, such that municipalities and local and state governments are hard pressed to cope with the numbers of people being displaced. Further, the accretion patterns within these sets also include a major pollution event, yet upcoming, that will induce most of several counties' populations to flee the area. Again, each of these sets have crosslinks terminating in other sets indicating deep failures of the government as the various agencies and organizations within government attempt to manage the situation. The data sets are indicating that at some time in 2016, the federal government will decline to prosecute people in many areas, as they cite jury tampering, which is their euphemism for unable to get a jury of locals that will accept our point of view. And as they will be without funds and the judicial system itself will be dysfunctional, this will mean many repetitious statements in the media about mercy and local justice will be part of the positive feedback loop for the self-reliant meme. As model spaces moves through September 2015, and again, just because I just read you that previous paragraph doesn't mean, oh, well, he's talking about right now because he just said as model spaces move through 2015 September. That doesn't mean that. He's just saying at this point in time, as he's moving through model space September 2015, here's what I'm about to say. It's all he's saying. The USA POP gains sets that are pointing toward a duality, unlike anything seen previously in the game of American politics. There are data sets indicating that both a fracturing and a uniting will be taking place. The fracturing is within the various political parties from the top down to the bottom, resulting in rejection of the illusion being offered by their former political identity. The fracturing is described as being at a grassroots level to begin and strong enough to impact fundraising efforts so seriously that the two party dictatorship remains looking extremely as though it is the rich and powerful party, as nearly 100% of its meaningful monies end up coming from fewer than 20,000 people nationwide. Further problems come into the political picture as the data sets are forecasting that the wave of defections, I must have defections will flow upwards and remove a number of key staffers who actually get things done. Further sets point to political opportunists who will be near to mid-top and will quit their parties in an attempt to ride the popular wave. Chaos will be something of a dominating linguistic appellation of the American political scene from about February 2016 onward. As model spaces progress through the rest of 2015, new data sets are accruing that are going to the collapse and or disappearance of the pension funds. Quick look shocked on that, right? I mean, I think most of us knew that. But again, if it's in the data, the Webbot's going to report it. These data sets are seemingly referencing all manner of pensions, including government programs. The private pension funds will also be hugely impacted, both by the credit fee freeze, but also by the attempts of governments to get cash, money, liquidity from anywhere that they may. And as may be expected, the participating members of these pension funds are not pleased. In episodes not seen in the USA in some time, large numbers of formerly middle-class people take to the streets and riots and violence ensue. The visuals coming from these large demonstrations are very incongruous as they describe young military and police beating and being beaten by aged and infirm retirees. The many riots and other carnage, and he has in parentheses, actual deaths videotaped from riots as old people cut down by police, also include supporting sets for the food riots that will sweep through the eastern seaboard states. Please recall that we have had longer-term data sets for these events since 2005. The descriptions that began in those data sets are still being reinforced and supported by the new data. These sets include the food riot spills over into secret military installation datasets. These sets would seem to be within the next 2 years of appearing within the media or what's left of the media, as well as the P2P or peer-to-peer information circuits such as social media sites. The data sets are still building under the idea of a secrets revealed dump of massive proportions as the space alien material / documents are liberated and set into the wild during the riots. The data details go to the idea of a group of young people who realize what they have discovered during the event, and they set about systematically removing and disseminating the information. At that point, even though the government becomes aware of the situation, they are powerless to do anything about it, nor to take retribution after the fact. Now, in the newly accruing data sets, we have aspects / attributes that show some of the secrets revealed to include the USA assassination files for the last 2 centuries. Boy, oh boy, would I like to see that list. The datasets are indicating that the DoD and subcontractors will be bereft and dry and broke and deprived of cash flow as the credit freeze deepens. The issues apparently involve chains of supply that fail when companies producing subcomponents fail or are unable to secure financing for things such as payroll and transportation. Further problems arise with supply chains involving importations of foreign goods, as these are indicated to dry up in a very spectacular fashion. Further detail sets within these subsets are also in the direct supporting chain of the ALTA forecast from 2007 of the U.S. foreign military bases abandoned and collections raised by local populations to get the soldiers and workers back to the U.S. And that old Webot report was a little bit more detailed than that little sentence. And it went along the lines of saying, imagine people across the world that are American citizens on vacation, our military, all these installations we have everywhere, and those countries instantly saying, we don't want you here anymore. Get your stuff out of here and go right now, ASAP. Only to find out, okay, we're going to get on these planes, regular planes, like you'd go to an airport, and here's my money. I'd like a ticket, please, to America, anywhere. Just give me back to America. Sorry, we don't take your currency. What do you mean you don't take my currency? It's American dollars, U.S. dollar. USA, USA. You, oh, you better not say that too loud. You better not even use the word USA except for a whisper when this time comes. And they're told we don't take that turd of a currency. Figure out another way to get our currency so that you can then buy a ticket to get out of here. That was what was told years ago in the report. So, other areas within the USA POP are showing that the daily breakdowns of the various electronic support systems cause a wearing away of both trust and confidence in the system. The datasets are showing that several Western media personalities will be detained or imprisoned as a result of their being in China at the wrong time. Western media personalities. Oh, I can't wait to see who that is. I can see Geraldo, sorry, but or any of them, these top guys. Oh, I'd love to see them over there. Geraldo, whatever you want to call him. Geraldo. Markets entity. A major problem of an emotional and mental nature will be afflicting most, if not all, of the personalities that we call traders. And I believe he's talking about like market traders as we move forward in this year. The data sets start accruing mid-September in supporting areas for the coagulation in which traders are showing as living in denial and performing rituals and consulting wizards and sorcerers. These sets are in their turn supported by aspect/attribute sets, which include depressed when examining reality and unbelieving of what senses are reporting, and other language indicating that the global equities meltdown, ooze out, flow out, and other similar language appears, will not be understood for what it is, which in turn will cause a large, most percentage of the traders to ride it down, trying to ride it out. The data sets are filling in the tertiary support levels within the daily traded paper debt market set of the markets entity for suicides. Additional note, many of which will be legitimate rather than bank hits, of not only traders but also principals and clients. Model space has new growth in sets for fleeing fund/pension managers and mobs of aged clients crowding through brokerages, New York, London, Hong Kong, and visuals, seeking their money. I'm going to wish them luck and I'm going to give them a sentence from Lindsay Williams. If you have any of your money in any piece of paper, when this all goes down, it won't be worth the paper it was written on. The datasets are placing very large supporting sets under the fading and wearing down and eroding confidence of and in central banks and paper debt instruments, not only in the public at large, but also within the trading community. Here the data sets are speaking about outflows and runs on brokerages and beating up/mobbing brokers and fund managers being dragged off golf courses and from within their houses to face mobs demanding money. Other sets go to a brawl that will develop in a very upscale restaurant, likely New York or environs, in which brokers are beaten and crowned with food before being driven from the shambles of their party. Further sets are showing that a case of near copy, a similar scene, will be videotaped by guests at a function on the West Coast, likely LA, Southern California. In both instances, the motivation is pension funds lost or reduced significantly. The data sets for the markets are now being dominated by rising supporting sets within the secondary support level by the gold and silver sets. These sets themselves are being propelled into new levels of highs within the multidimensional arrays that hold our emotional quantifiers and quantifiers and qualifiers. These secondary support levels include new language such as fellowship between gold and silver and rising in linked fashion. These in their turn, are supported by language going to the idea of new taken out highs and far look to see the end of the rise. New highs breaking records, and boy, it looks like there's no end in sight. That is why I've been telling you to get precious metals, because when they've lost their control and they can't control that market anymore, that precious metals market, you are not going to be the one who says, I thought I'd wait this one out and get and see where it went and then buy some. When this happens, you better have your gold and silver before this happens. Before this happens, period. And again, I'll tell you, I'm 100% all in on silver. Sold the little gold that I had years ago, exchanged it immediately for silver. Now, where was I? The newly accruing language for the gold and silver subsets within the markets entity includes sets that include providing sustenance, able to quench thirst. Additional note, both of these and other sets are in support of silver pence minor pieces. Other sets bring out data going to the idea of bartering/trading with silver coins as a base. The data sets have supporting language going to fractional ounces as well as grams. A very large number of sets within the markets entity are terminating sets for other entities or for internal crosslinks. Many of these terminating sets are filled with supporting language replete with panic to own or possess, and searching desperately for mostly forgotten old treasure from memories and greed-driven quests/searches for gold/silver heirlooms. All of these sets are within groups that begin appearing in late September and grow appreciably as model space is progressed through to the end of December. At that point in model space movement, several new sets burst into the display and intersect with the gold/silver major subsets. Within these sets, there are rapidly filling sets containing language about governments and their reactions to the developing transition state of the world. Some of these sets are forecasting that some governments will attempt as early as late December 2015 to suppress the use of gold or silver for local or in-country transactions, while others will be doing everything in their power to solicit gold and silver from the populace. These latter sets are cross-linked internally over to sets going to the idea of if you don't have gold, we don't trade, becoming a prevailing attitude among countries around the planet, country to country. You don't have gold, we don't want to trade with you. Our country here, I don't see them confiscating gold or silver. What I see them doing is signs and commercials everywhere. Buy gold, we buy silver. As the Webbot also predicted a little while back, more than once, you will start to see we buy silver signs and we buy silver outfits coming up all over the place rather than just the we buy gold. And that's how I think our country's going to deal with it. The hyperstagflation. The hyperstagflation is also supported by sets that indicate that in spite of everything that the Federal Reserve can do, the interest rates begin to rise during the coagulation of the last 3 weeks of September that sets the dollar up for wild actions in October. This period is being described as a dollar yuan panic, or Chinese currency is the yuan panic. This part of the data is focusing on great volatility within currencies and within the equities, aka debt markets. Further, the bond trade and capital flows become some of the most bespoke language on the social media across the planet as they publicly break down. Markets entity has very large data sets that still are growing at very considerable rates. In some of these sets, the data is forecasting a great devaluing in which there are supporting sets that are going to vast amounts of debt that is going to just disappear or vanish, in many cases, actually overnight. The Great Vanishing is described as global, begins in China, spreads to the Western economies by way of the EU, and then sweeps over the Americas. Note that the data progression is talking about the next or upcoming wave of devaluations and not the current economic problems. This great vanishing of debt is a participating subset within the credit freeze set. As model space is progressed into mid-year 2016, new patterns are emerging that suggest that many areas of the U.S. housing and commercial real estate will be devastated and non-functioning. In some of these areas, the data is describing former strip malls and commercial office buildings being opened, sometimes by the owners, sometimes not, for the formation of impromptu markets where local food growers and providers will be trading for items of value. The descriptions make these gatherings for local trade sound very much like souks in Iran. In some of the data sets, we get glimpses of thousands of people who will gather routinely every weekend, that sort of thing, to try to sell whatever they can have, whatever they can of household or personal possessions. The data continues to describe multiple mile-long boulevards that are lined on both sides with tens of thousands of sellers. The data sets contain language going to some of these areas becoming new public commons/markets over these next 20 years of struggle, keeping in mind global struggle for the next 20 years, not just America only or some other country only. This is global. So that is the end. It's my 6 pages, almost about 5.5 pages. And this isn't surprising. This isn't shocking. But when the Webbot first came out and he was releasing these reports, this kind of stuff wasn't exactly in there as much as it was, much as I just read to you. There was little hints of things, and oh, we see the dollar, death of the dollar meme coming, and that's going to be drawn out over the coming years, and new reports would come out, Webbot reports. Yep, death of the dollar, it's still coming, it's still coming. Yep, oh, death of the dollar. Just every report pretty much talked about the death of the dollar. Way before anybody else talked about the death of the dollar. And here it is, live in your face. And yes, we have another Chinese chemical plant explosion. I'm sure that was a coincidence too. That makes, I believe, number 4 now in about 3 weeks' time. Take care.